It is the Monday before Christmas, and we are tying a bow on this Advent series. The transfer portal, speaking of Monday morning quarterback, the transfer portal is opening, and Jesus in a few days is going to move from heaven to earth.
That's
through the
really
Virgin
bad.
Mary.
That's really bad.
Wow.
I thought about that all week, guys.
That's
I
bad.
was excited to share that.
You do a lot
Nope.
better than that. That just
And the thing is, there's like, maybe 20 college football fans watching this that know what you're talking about. Everybody else is going, what in the
Yeah.
Star Wars is going
Think
on
about
out
that.
there?
Jesus was the first person in the transfer portal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
really good.
Bethlehem's getting ready to get an NIL deal.
Yeah, that's Coach Prime's
Someone
stuff right
someone
there.
will share that joke.
Yeah,
this week.
yeah.
One of you guys like that, and I
Mhm.
know it.
I hope so. I'm going to use it on Christmas Eve. Is what
All
I'm
right,
gonna do.
speaking of Christmas Eve,
Yeah.
Christmas Eve's coming up. We know for Christians that's a big day as we celebrate Jesus' birth. And so Christmas Eve will be a busy day for us getting the campuses ready. They're all decorated. We have snacks and drinks and all kind of stuff, welcoming people, photo booths set up. Let's talk about y'all's tradition once the service is over. Everybody leaves, they go home. We lock the doors, turn the lights out. Christmas Eve, I love, when I met Stephen, man, probably 15 years ago, I found out what Stephen did and his family did on Christmas Eve. And like, I laugh. Every Christmas Eve, I think about this. Tell us what you guys do on Christmas Eve.
I don't know why this is so strange.
It's great.
It's
I
just
think it's
normal.
great.
All right, yeah. So Christmas Eve service ends, and either myself or Kim will slip out into the lobby, and we'll make a call to China Chef. We are ordering some Chinese for pickup. It'll be ready in about 25 minutes. So by the time we close up and we get there, we just swing by the Chinese restaurant and take it home, and that's what we have. It's a Christmas Eve tradition. We make sure that we do not have Chinese anytime after Thanksgiving. Like, that would be breaking the rules, because it's
Okay.
got to be special on Christmas Eve. That's our Christmas Eve tradition for food, and then we eat that and watch a Christmas movie.
So I know
Is it
China
always the
has
same movie?
No, I mean, it's usually either Home Alone 1, 2, or Elf.
Oh, okay.
And when they were younger, Polar Express.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know China has their own New Year. Do they not have Christmas? Like, do they not celebrate Christmas? Is
I've
that-
never asked them.
Wow.
Wow.
This is the year for evangelism,
This is the
Stephen.
year for you.
This
Yeah.
is
I will
the
I will
year.
ask them. I will find that out this season.
Yeah, yeah.
Report back to us, Matthew.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Well, ours is always food related too, food centric. I think is most of our traditions. We always eat. Well, always is probably a rough term, but about 10 or so years ago, we started having fancy meal like after Christmas Eve. We would always go growing up to a Moravian love feast.
Golden Corral? Is this?
Yes, yes, where we go to Golden Corral. No, it would be steak, but it would be good steak. Usually, and not Golden Corral steak. So we go to a Moravian love feast and then come home and eat. It's switched a lot now that I'm working on Christmas Eve, and so is Kristen and her husband Jason are usually doing stuff at the
Yeah.
South Fork campus. So it's different now, but I mean that's just what happens as kids grow up and traditions change. But we still eat really good, usually some sort of steak. And then when we were kids growing up, it was always sit around and read the Christmas story and candlelight. Go to when we were older, but still crazy, and we would go to NORAD tracking Santa to figure out if he's getting close to our house yet, and all that kind of stuff. But now it's just switched to just dinner and go do your own things.
I like it. Well, hopefully you guys have some traditions with your family that you do on Christmas Eve. We're looking forward to that. Now, for the preaching series that we've done, this series on Advent, we've talked about hope, we've talked about joy, we've talked about peace. This Sunday was love. So tell me this, which one of those out of the 4 Sundays, like for you, did you find the hardest to prepare for, the hardest to preach? I mean, I think everybody associates these words with Christmas, but we come at it from like a teaching perspective. So Matthew, which one of those 4 was the most difficult to prepare for as we're working towards Christmas?
Honestly, yesterday I think was the hardest.
Okay.
Not because love is hard, but because there's so much about God's love. And so there's a million things that could be said, and it's that way with hope and peace and joy too, in a sense. But I thought yesterday was really challenging for me to figure out, just if we're going to spend this Sunday talking about the love of God sent to us in Jesus, like what all is there to focus on? There's a lot to focus on. So many different things and directions I could have gone. Even just in Romans 5, the 2 mentions of God's love that I was preaching on was really challenging. I had it 8 or 9 points, and I knew, even though I had 8 or 9 points, I can't have 8 or 9. So I was like, all right, which ones can I, mesh into others, just remove completely, use another time, all that kind of stuff. But it was tough to condense God's love into a 30-minute message when we're talking about love at Christmas time, is especially impactful as well. And so you don't want to just be like, oh, whatever, it's just love. Everybody knows about God's love, because you want to be able to really communicate that as meaningfully and as well as possible. So I thought yesterday was tough.
Love as well, but for a little bit different reasons, because hope, peace, and joy are something that we have to feel a lot, and we need to choose and select in our lives. But love is not a feeling, it's an action. So this had more of a curveball to it, and to try to dig deeper into what we need to do to actually be loving and have love. It's a little different than hope, peace, and joy. So I hope that that came across appropriate for people, and that it was something that would actually have love this Christmas. And instead of, it was a little bit different. I think the other ones were maybe more encouraging and very thought provoking, in the sense of, wow, I really needed that. But the love one was like, wow, I really need to do that. So a little bit different.
Now the host doesn't always answer the questions,
Yeah.
but I
Which
am
one for
interested.
you?
You don't have to explain it long, just like which one.
I think love, for the same
Really?
reason.
Wow,
Like for
that's
me,
crazy,
love
all
is,
three
you
of
can
us.
talk about love all year round. And but hope, joy, and peace, like, yeah, those are synonymous with
Yeah.
Christmas. But I started asking myself, is the Christmas story a love story? Would I consider it that? It's definitely a story of joy and of hope and peace. But when I think of love, I think of Valentine's. I think, Easter, definitely, how much God loved us to sacrifice His Son. But for some reason, I don't know, I just don't view Christmas as a love story, and was really just trying to force myself to think through it in that lens. So agreed, which is like, how in the world do you tie this in? There's
Right.
1,000 different ways that you can
Mhm.
preach on love and talk about love this time of year. So I know what passage you preached.
Yep.
Surprise, in
Romans
the book
5.
of Romans 5. But you found all 4 of the Advent words in that passage.
Yeah.
That's why you chose
Yep.
it. But talk about a little bit about what was it about that passage that you really tied into this aspect of Christmas and love?
Yeah, what I thought was interesting that I never knew until I was looking at it, because each week I've tried to go with the word in Romans 5 and preach that verse or couple of verses, and then use illustrations and stories from the Christmas story, like Luke 2 or Matthew 1, something like that. And I found it really interesting this week, when as I was going through, love is not mentioned once in Luke 1 and 2 or Matthew 1 and 2. Hope and joy and peace, you can find it in rejoice or hope, or the word peace, like that's all that's in the Christmas story, but love is not. And so it was really interesting for me to then go, okay, so where do we see love implied instead of explicitly stated? And what about the love that we're seeing in Romans 5 connects to Jesus's incarnation, to Him becoming God in human flesh, and how does all of that connect? And so being able to do that, that was really, it was a challenge for me, but it's also really interesting, and I thought really helpful to kind of zoom out and see Christmas from not Luke 1 or Luke 2 or Matthew 1, but to take it from, I've never heard anybody preach Christmas and love and hope and peace and joy and love from pretty much any place other than 1 or 2 of the prophetic books, and then Matthew chapter 1 and 2 and Luke 1 and 2. So to be able to try and see it from that perspective was really, really good for me. Challenging, but a good perspective, I thought, for me personally.
That's interesting that in those passages, Matthew and Luke, the Christmas narrative, obviously the fingerprint of God's love for the
Right.
world is all over it,
Right.
but never mentions the word. That's interesting.
And maybe there's a
I hadn't
translation
seen
that I didn't check that has one, but the explicit mention of love and the more literal translations that I was looking at, because that's where I thought it would be. Nope.
Well,
none in there.
community notes will correct us on
Yeah,
that if
drop
you're
some
wrong.
community notes.
But Stephen, what do you think? How'd you connect your passage to love in the Christmas season yesterday?
Yeah, well, kind of building on his, that makes my point about why I talked about love from here. It's kind of like the Esther story. Throughout that whole book, God is not mentioned. The name of God is not mentioned, but the fingerprint, the thread, it's all over the story.
Mhm.
And yeah, the word love isn't specifically written, but I think that's how our culture, that's how we look at love today. Like, oh man, I love ice cream, or I love the holidays. I love this gift. And it's a feeling. But in scripture, love is shown, it's demonstrated, it's acted out. So if you look for where is love shown in the story, you're going to see it over and over again in the Christmas story in Matthew and Luke. And so it's not written the word, but it's demonstrated. That's why love is not a feeling, it's an action. So I mean, we get this in John 3:16. This is how God loved the world, that he gave his only one and only son.
Mhm.
God demonstrated his love for us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So that's how he loved. It's always like God shows his love. It's demonstrated. And so you see the love story throughout. First, just God's actions of love, like the sending Jesus, but also including the shepherds in on this. They were nobody. They were outcasts. They were overlooked. Like, get out of here, get out of town. What are you doing in the inner city? Kind of vibe. And God's like, no, I love you. I'm going to include you in this. You're really special and important to me. You may not have a story. I'm going to give you one. That's love. Like, God showed his love to them.
Mm.
You think about Mary's response. That was her like loving the Lord by just submitting to God's plan and trusting him in it, all that she went through. And Joseph's, all the backlash that he would receive as a Jewish man at this time. Man, this was his love for God and his obedience to him. Like, that was his love demonstrated. The Magi, the trip that they made, the expensive gifts of worship that they gave their very best as well. That's love. And so I see it all over. And that's kind of what I showed yesterday, that love is an action. And so how are we going to love this season?
Yeah. Well, something about those four words have just been grounding for me this Christmas season. I mean, just simplifying it into hope, joy, peace, and love in the midst of a chaotic season. I hope that's been as centering for you as it was for me. And so we're expecting to see a lot of people on on Christmas Eve in 2 days. Bring family, bring friends, bring your loved ones, bring your lost neighbors. We're all going to be talking about Jesus. Heads up, surprise, spoiler alert, we're talking about Jesus on Christmas Eve. But for some people that might be joining us online or maybe traveling, what's a word of encouragement as we have so many people of the REVO family that are listening and watching the podcast? Man, you guys are their pastors. You love them. You pray for them. You care about them. Man, what's a challenge for them this week? What's a word of encouragement that you can leave with them as they celebrate Jesus's birth and also move into the expectation of a new year coming up? What you
Yeah.
got, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe that Christmas morning. How are you going to go about that? I would really be intentional. Go ahead and make the plans, especially if you're a father, or if you're a man and you're going to lead this time together with your family. And I just really think that planning through it intentionally would be well. And maybe you don't know what to say, and oh, the family won't care, or the kids aren't going to listen. So I would encourage you to tell your family why Christmas means something to you. Like, talk about your testimony, who God is to you, why you're thankful that Jesus has come, and the reason. Think about, what if he didn't? What would our life be like then? But make it applicable to your family, and it's going to be really hard to do that. So I want to encourage you that if you really struggle to do that, um, part of that probably, and I say this gently, is maybe because your family hasn't seen you really mean it all year. So why don't we start it now? Like, going forward, why don't we really live for Jesus, and that he is the reason for your life, not just for this Christmas day. And by the time next Christmas comes around, like, your family will totally see the living testimony that you're giving, and it'll be shown and demonstrated, and it'll be better caught than taught. And so if you're struggling this Christmas to do it, just start this season, make it real. Use that time. Don't just skip right to the presents, but put some emphasis on the real reason for the season. But use your story and show your love for your family, whoever's around you on that day.
Yeah, great reminder. Matthew?
Yeah, I was thinking that might be a one good way to do that as a mom or a dad, somebody that's wanting to point their family and the people around them to Jesus, but are worried, like, I haven't really shown it great all year. It's like one great way to start, like right now on the 23rd, 24th, or 25th, is to be thankful to the people that you're going to be seeing. And so, making sure you're expressing gratitude to the host, whoever's hosting the dinner or the breakfast, or making sure that you are super thankful towards your kids, even though they might annoy the heck out of you. And you're like, man, I can't wait for school to start back, like that one Christmas song, or mom and dad can't wait for school to start again. It's like, well, how can I be thankful for them to them, and make sure that they see that I love and I care about them. But I was thinking too about how important it is, because we love the gift giving and the gift receiving of Christmas, to make sure that we share how grateful we are to God for these things. Make sure we acknowledge that these are gifts that He gives, even though it might have been, my job that brought in the money that then bought the gifts, and then my job that brought in the money that wrapped the gifts and the bow and the name tag and the Sharpie you used to write on there or whatever. But being able to say, all right, well, let's stop and pause and say everything comes from God. James, every good and perfect gift comes from above. And so we should be able to thank God for all of these things, give Him the glory for every little thing that happens this Christmas. So whether it's the food on the table or the gift under the tree or the family time together, or a good weather day or a pretty Christmas tree with lights on it, like every little tiny thing, being able to stop and say thank you to God. It doesn't have to be a 30-minute long prayer or a praise break that you take during the middle of the presents that lasts for 3 hours or anything. It's like just every now and then, being willing to be thankful in our hearts, but then also express that out loud for the people around us to hear, to be very grateful and give God all the glory for the good things that we get to experience on these couple days out of the year that we love so much. So I would challenge us to do that. Make sure we're glorifying God, not just in the things that we do, but also in how we are thankful for what we have this time of year.
This season is unique for followers of Jesus because of Emmanuel. God is with us. We're the only major religion in the world that claims that God came to be with His creation, desired a relationship, and to this day is still with us. So as you celebrate, whether it's blowing out the candles on the Jesus birthday cakes that we gave away hundreds of in the month of December, maybe it's you sitting down with your family and reading Luke chapter 1 and 2 on Christmas morning or Christmas Eve. Maybe it's attending one of our gatherings on Christmas Eve on all three of our campuses. Listen, this is a tradition that we hold dearly, making much of the Savior that has been born, the fact that God is with us. So from our team to your family in an incredibly powerful and meaningful time of the year, we wish you a Merry Christmas and hope that you'll keep Jesus at the center of it all, not just now, but as we look forward to what God is going to do in 2025.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone.